recently, this is only available over a secure origin, so you cannot access the geolocation over HTTP anymore, understandably, because it's private data where I am actually standing at the moment. So that's now only available through HTTPS. Getting the front-facing camera is a case of using navigator.getUserMedia, or for the if I just want video, for instance, I just do video true. If I want video and audio, or if I just want audio, I just give it an object. I can also define the resolution, or I can give it a resolution hint to say I want this to be HD, or if I want this to be VGA. And what I get back is a stream, and I'm just pointing that to a video element, and that will start streaming the video directly inline in my web page. Getting the battery levels are in browsers. So I can do navigator.getBattery, gives me a promise back, and the promise contains this battery object. It has things like charging, true or false. Here I've got battery.level, I'm logging out to the console, so that's a value between 0 and 1. It'll fire events when it's being plugged in and unplugged, so you could literally change the style of the page depending on whether or not the device is charging. We have some rudimentary network information. Now, obviously, I don't think network information is particularly reliable because you can have Wi-Fi and be in a captive portal, or you could have cellular and you could have, a moving train, and you've got 2G and maybe LTE and crappy connection. But you have this in browsers today. You can listen for the network connection change. So maybe if it's switching from Wi-Fi down to not Wi-Fi, you could change the way the app behaves. And we have navigator.vibrate, so we can actually vibrate the phone. If anyone's seen the Chrome offline page with the dinosaur, if you crash into the cactus, it vibrates. It's just using this API. So generally, it's looking pretty good. This is a list of the core plugins. The one thing that's got a big cross next to it is the contacts. If I recall, there was actually a contacts API, but I don't know where that went, and I think maybe it was a security thing that they eventually didn't want to put it into the web. And there's loads of other APIs, things like there's a navigator.sendBeacon, so you can send beacon information when your page is being closed. So some people you might try when you close a tab to send some analytics to say my app's being closed. If you do it before unload, when the tab's closed, it will kill the connection, but you can do a send beacon and it will fire it out and it will make it to your server. There are stream APIs that are landing in browsers. Bluetooth and physical web APIs are landing in browsers today. Now, I've kind of shoehorned a video into my presentation because it's very cool, a really good example of how frictionless the web can be, but it is literally shoehorned. So this is a demonstration of someone using their browser to discover a device, a physical device. So the physical web that you're about to see on his phone is part of Chrome. I think you have to turn it on manually today, but it's getting there. So they discovered nearby Bluetooth devices. They choose to connect to one of them, or to open the web page, rather. Sorry, it's a beacon, so it gives it a web page. From there, it's listing the Bluetooth devices that are nearby and open, in which the user connects, and then using the web page, they're driving this toy around. So there was no installation on their phone. The setup time from having the toy to actually using it was nothing, because it was all just there as part of the web. Now, Bluetooth is behind flags. It's very new. But I just want to show that this stuff is starting to land. He'll later go on to talk to it and so on. So when I was looking at the PhoneGap plugins, there was a really strong focus on platform support. And understandably, because that's the hard part, right? You've got a plugin that works on iOS. You now need to rewrite the whole thing to work on Android. And then you might want to do it for Windows as well, and then if you might want to put it on BlackBerry 10, and so on and so forth. So the focus is on the multiple languages. Although when I was checking the featured apps, it was pretty much every featured app was Android and iOS. I didn't come across any others that supported Windows or other platforms. And the web is obviously completely different. If a browser supports a class of APIs, it should be the same across devices, across like hardware. And there's a caveat that goes with that, because there are some times the hardware is very slightly different, it behaves slightly differently. That would be a bug, though. And there's a caveat with Apple, which I'll come on to. But the key feature that browsers are trying to support is interoperability. It's a simple equation, right? So if your web app looks amazing in browser X and everyone's using it, browser Y is going to want to have that same experience, if not better. So they're going to try and they want that interoperability. They want to get you across their browsers. The web is a long game. It will always make progress. Core principle is to make sure it's free and accessible to everyone. And one of the other core principles is security. It has to be secure, and that can come at the cost of the development process. And some of the APIs and some of the technology I'm going to show you is tucked behind HTTPS. You have to get through that first barrier. But over the years since 2009, web's native support for APIs that PhoneGap provided initially has dramatically improved. And the ecosystem is very different on the web to that day in 2009. But I do have this kind of buzzword bingo. There's usually the what about Apple? And I've met actually a number of developers that they started off in the web years and years ago, and then they shifted across to Flash because they didn't enjoy the experience of coding for different browsers and trying to handle the different bugs. On one hand, I kind of hate that Apple will not pull up to the table and discuss their intentions and whether or not they will support the web developers, the open web. Even getting a hint of interest from Apple can be a process of dumpster diving the mailing lists, just for the smallest indication as to whether or not they're considering an API, because it's all private and secret, basically. Apple also won't let any other browsers into their platform. This really pisses me off, frankly. So Chrome is just a wrapper on Safari. And some of the new technology that's landed in Chrome and Opera and Firefox will not be in iOS because it's still Safari. And until Safari catches up, that browser may not be able to play these games. On the other hand, equally, Apple, just like Mozilla and Chrome and Opera, are companies. They don't have to, they behave as they please. They do not have to necessarily answer our beck and call. So secrecy is how Apple operate, for better or worse, and that's just how it is. The upshot, though, is that with some of the technologies like Service Worker and push notifications that I'll show you, these are already implemented in Chrome, Opera, and Firefox. There are positive signals coming out from Microsoft in the Edge browser that they're looking at implementing it. I think they are starting to implement parts of it. So that just leaves Safari by itself. And if people are making amazing mobile web apps using this technology, and they're losing browser market share because people are moving to browsers like Chrome and Opera, Safari will be forced to implement these things because they need to support developers and people using the websites. Not forced, but gently encouraged. So I posted a thought exercise on Twitter. Like, could Instagram, or why is Instagram a native app today? And could it be a web? Could it be done entirely using web? And it's not to say that it should be rewritten as a website. And there's a bunch. I put it out to Twitter, so you get kind of a varied degree of answers. Now, the limitations that I finally kind of got boiled down to were there's no ability to focus a camera in line with a browser. There's no access inline, as into inline to the camera roll, and I suspect that's to do with security. I can give the user an input type file, and they can browse their own camera roll, but I can't just suck those into my app. One of the biggest things was actually client-side transcoding of video and compression of video in particular. Sole Penedez, butchering her name, she wrote a follow-up post to this tweet. And a few years ago at Mozilla, she'd been doing a lot of investigation into native apps and what is it that web is missing. And one of these big things was the ability to do video transcoding without destroying the phone, like cooking the battery and so on. And one of the other big things that's missing is even if this was a web app, say you had your native Photos app, photo browser, you want to share your photo into this web app. There's no way to do that today. There used to be a way. There was a proposal put out, Web Intents, that would allow a web app to register with a pseudo protocol, and you could say, okay, I want my native app to open into this web app, but it got canned. It got canned because the UX wasn't right. I suspect it will reemerge with a different approach, but that's one big thing that's missing. But the things that are possible are all of the real-time filters. So you can do part of the work with CSS3 filters, and to generate the image, you can use WebGL. You can do that in real time. You can do inline videos and inline audio. Certainly for Android, and there are hacks to do it for iOS in a browser. You can do the fast shell loading. One of the concerns would be maybe that it would download too much data, but a web app version of this would be exactly the same. There would be it would just be the content that was coming down, the images and so on. So you'd have the fast loading shell using web workers. You can use things like Interaction Observer API, which says that an element has come into view, and then I want to actually go and load it. Or it's kind of a 50 pixels threshold from coming in view. I want to start loading it in the background. And then push notifications. We have that in the browsers today. The bottom line is, though, plugins will beat browsers hands down. Okay? So depending on your criteria and your context, plugins will always be ahead of browsers. I personally believe that the big advantage that Cordova and PhoneGap have is the plugin ecosystem. Things like being able to send an SMS or accessing the contacts. Or if a new device comes out tomorrow that has a brand new sensor, you can have a plugin for it available the next day, and you will have access to it long before any browser releases an API that gives you access to it. It may take months for a browser to give you access, if not years. So, plugins are definitely a big, big win, and that's not an area that browsers can compete. It definitely informs some of the direction that browsers need to go. And the other thing, I've worked with some clients where they say, we need to use PhoneGap to get it into the App Store. Okay, so CEO wants their company present or their product present in the App Store. They want to have adverts on a radio telling their listeners to go to their website, then go to the App Store and download their app. And Apple take a decent share of this, these profits. But when you actually put it up against the numbers, it really doesn't it's really not very attractive when you actually look at the numbers rather than just kind of finger in the air. It'd be great to have it in the website. Research has shown, I've got a link to the research, that the user experience of requiring an action, every action creates a 20% fall-off rate, which has a direct effect when you want to send your user to an app store to install your app. Now, Alex Russell of Chrome DevRel uses these numbers in some of his presentations, so I'm going to use the same numbers as well. So say I have 1,000 users interested in installing my app on my home screen. Okay, so I start off with 1,000. I've already lost 20% going to the App Store, so I'm on 800 users. I find the app, 640 users. I install the app. I'm getting close to 50% at this point. By the time they're accepting permissions, I've got 410 people for each of the 20% fall-offs. Download and wait, and then eventually use. I'm left with 262 users out of that initial 1,000. So if I'm going through the full flow, out of those 1,000 people, I'm left with 25%, linked to the researchers at the bottom. If I get them directly into the App Store and directly into that page where all they have to do is click to install, I've skipped 2 of those steps, but I'm still under 50% of those users. That's an expensive trade-off. What if I could skip that entirely? What if I could use web technology to get onto the home screen and behave like a native app, or not even behave like a native app, but perform equally to a native app? So this is where progressive web apps comes in. Now, yeah, it's low marketing speak, I think, sort of, but every big change, I think, needs a hook. I didn't coin this term, by the way, but it needs a hook, like Ajax, or Comet, or polyfills, and this is working. So there's Google have a bunch of case studies up on their fundamentals website. This is one of them. So Flipkart is the largest e-commerce site in India that temporarily took down their mobile app and switched it over to a progressive web app. So this is a Flipkart Lite experience. And they tracked the conversions and the retention rates, and they found that users were spending 3 times longer on their web app than their website. They had a 40% higher engagement compared to their website. They had a 70% greater conversion from the home screen, from that icon on the home screen. And it used less data because they weren't chucking everything down the wire all the time. They were using the service worker cache to deliver a shell and provide a better experience. Now, they have stats that show that 63% of their Flipkart Lite users were reaching their website using a 2G connection, which means that the fast user experience was essential. They wouldn't want to sit there waiting for it to load. And with the service workers and the cache, the offline support, users were able to browse categories they'd already looked at, go back to old searches they'd already looked at, and view product pages they'd already looked at, even offline or on a flaky connection. And it would just sync up the extra data as they need it. So Alex Russell posted around last year, escaping the tab, progressive, not hybrid. Okay? So he said that an evolution took place in browsers, and Francis Berryman and Alex enumerated a number of factors, which I've kind of sort of distilled down to this, but websites or web apps now are responsive, they're connectivity independent, i.e. they progressively enhance using service workers. They have these app shells, similar to kind of native apps. They're fresh in that web apps will update themselves with upgrades and bug fixes. You don't have to go ahead and actually update them or freeze on a particular version. They're safe because they're served over HTTPS, because HTTPS is one of the baseline requirements for this stuff, which means there's no snooping. It's discoverable because of the manifest file, which I'll show you in a moment, and the service worker registration, which allows search engines to find them. They can re-engage a user using push notifications. They're installable. And they have the same linkability that the web has, that can link to anywhere and link into anywhere. So I'm looking at it from these 3 perspectives: security, permissions, HTTPS, performance, that it feels fast, is fast, it animates fast as well. All the animation needs to be really quick. And the availability to the user. So to get this add to home screen, we need a service worker, and we need a manifest file, and we need HTTPS. But if the app is on my home screen, it damn well better work, okay? Because there's no distinction between a progressive web app and a regular native app on my home screen. There's no visual difference, just an icon. So when I tap on it, it must work. So I just want to show you what push looks like as well. To get push notifications, you need to have a service worker, because it's the service worker that registers the subscription and handles the push event in the background. And what I want to show you here is I'm subscribing to the cat a day or cat every 10-minute message, but I'm closing the tab. I'm discarding it completely. You probably can't see, but up in the top, I'm going to get notification. And when I pull it down, I've got the push notification that I triggered elsewhere. And we were talking over dinner last night about I installed the Amazon app on my phone. I was trying to look at a couple of products recently, and I was so used to the interaction on a browser that when I opened whatever it was I was looking at on the native app, I tried to then open the comparison in the native app and realized that I couldn't switch back and forth between the two very easily because it's a shell app. It doesn't have any concept of tabs. And one comment from, I haven't forgotten your name, but you're sat right in front of me. But my dinner partner, I guess, yeah, said that he'd actually gotten rid of the native app and just used the website at the cost of not getting any of the delivery notifications. Well, this technology changes that situation. You don't have to install an app on your phone. You can just accept the permissions from that website. It doesn't have to be on your phone, and they can give you things like delivery notifications from Amazon. And in fact, a company called Beyond the Rack did this same thing. It's another one of the case studies that are on, that's up on Google. They were seeing a 20% increase of traffic, or direct traffic through from push messages. And that was just with their website. There's no installation here. I've looked at the manifest that goes with this, and all they do is push messages. So these are the 4 core technologies, and I just want to show you some of the code that goes with service workers. They're event-driven. They use promises and the fetch API, which is like a upgrade to XHR. You register your service worker, and the events that fire are things like install, activate, push, fetch, and so on. So putting a service worker into your page is a process of progressive enhancement. If service worker support isn't there, your web app can still work, and should still work the way it would do if you were visiting a web page. So in this case, I'm checking if it exists inside of the navigator object. I'm registering my service worker. From there, my serviceworker.js looks like this. So this is the bare bones that I need to be able to create an offline app, and I've used this in JS Console already. I listen for the install event from the service worker, and I wait until the new cache object is open, and once I have that cache, I tell it to add all of these URLs. In this case, I'm just adding the root page, but I can add anything I want, CSS, images, fonts, and so on. And this is my cache I have control of. It's not like your temporary internet files cache. And then when the service worker intercepts all the network. It's basically a network proxy. So when it receives an event to fetch a URL, it goes through this, and that can decide what it does. It could change what it's sending back. It could just send back pictures of cats if it wanted to. In this case, I'm saying respond with a promise that either lifts the content out of the cache based on the request object, or go and fetch it from the internet. So if I don't have a hot cache, or my cache is empty, or the user's emptied the cache, I can try and fetch it from the internet. And I can add something that says if that fails as well, then serve them something else. Yeah, maybe it's a base64 encoded image. It means that things like this on a 2G connection is pretty slow. Okay, JS Console has very little to it. And this is an app cache, what am I talking about? Service worker version. All the shell is there immediately because it's all locally cached. I mean, this should be kind of common for PhoneGap because it's there, right? But adding to home, getting that first-class real estate, before was pretty nasty. Like, find the right menu, add bookmark, so on and so forth. Generally not a very good experience. You weren't sure if it was going to open a browser, if it's going to like a standalone shell. You didn't know what the icon was going to look like. Was it going to actually look like the browser? Was it going to be the one that you gave them? But users can now install apps as first-class citizens on their homepage. And that single tap to your app is obviously a big kind of boost for the companies. They want more users to their website if you have that first-class access, right? So getting that add to home screen is a case of having HTTPS there first, and also a service worker in place. You add a link rel that points to a JSON file, and the JSON file describes your application. Now, I've got more than I need in this JSON file. I have a short name for my app. I have high-resolution icons. That's the thing that's going to be used on the home screen, but also the splash screen. So the browser will dynamically create a splash screen based on the browser and based on the icon and the description. I can give it a starting point, which if I don't give it the starting point, it'll be where the user was when they installed. But in this case, I can add a tracking code, so I can track how many people are coming in from my homepage installed app. I can say whether or not it should be a standalone utility, whether it should be full screen or open in the browser. So if you're like a news site, you probably want to open a browser or Amazon. You can control the orientation, so you can actually force it into landscape rather than having kind of animations of people turning the screen. And you can control the colors. So this background color is going to be used for that dynamic splash screen again. The only things that are necessary are the name and the icon, the high-resolution icon. That's the only things you need for this to get the user to add to home. And there are some heuristics that they won't always prompt the user to add to home. It's only if they return to that website within a 5-minute, after 5 minutes session. It's something like that. It's defined and it's changing gently as more people use it, but you shouldn't be able to just show the icon automatically to everyone, otherwise it loses its value in the first place. I just wanted to kind of close on a little thing that I was trying to get some screenshots from my phone onto my laptop earlier this week for this presentation, and I was hunting the App Store, the Google App Store, for something that would just transfer files across to my laptop. And I searched and I found this thing, which I installed, which actually turns out only sends files from my desktop to my phone. And then I found this thing, which didn't quite do what I needed either. And then I tried AirDroid, which I know chews the battery on my phone, so I was very hesitant about adding it. In the end, someone sent me a tweet to this, which is, there's no URL. There's no URL because I launched it from my home screen. I think it's called SnapDrop.net or .com. It's all JavaScript, and it uses all of this technology. It uses WebRTC for peer-to-peer, and it did exactly what I needed. On this same network, when I was on the same network, I could send files from my phone, to my laptop without any installation process, and it was just there. So for me, it wasn't the technology, it was the UX was perfect, exactly what I was looking for. I got like 30 seconds to end on Brian. So I'm putting up the same article, the philosophies. So Brian wrote, we agree that there are no silver bullets and the web isn't the best tool for every job. However, the web is not getting worse. If the web doesn't do something today, it's not because it can't or won't, but rather because it hasn't got around to implementing it yet. And this is still fitting today. There's a great deal of demand for native APIs and access points, and the hackers will take on the problems first, and then the masses will adapt the hacks, and then we'll have it in the native land. But you have to do it right, and you have to make that experience really, really good, or the web has to do that, so we can instill the trust in the user that when they tap that icon, it's going to work. So thanks. Thanks to Brian for the quotes. Yeah.
Hello. We have a minute if you want to take a question.
Oh, well, I have a question slide.
Oh, perfect. Hands up if you have a question. Everyone looks a little sleepy. Oh, there we go. We got one.
One in the middle.
Hiya. At the start, you mentioned the fact that the issue is Safari here. Are you recommending that you build both an iPhone app and you do this stuff on the web, and then you wait for it to catch up? Or?
No. So, yeah, you got my bingo card, by the way, or about Apple. No, so with all of these technologies, they're all progressive enhancements. So the off the rack, I can't remember what it's called. Beyond the rack. The e-commerce website works perfectly well, or Amazon, in fact, actually. Amazon's website works perfectly well, and in fact, more, when they implement push notifications into their app, it'll be a progressive enhancement. It'll work. The baseline support is whatever the Apple browser is called, Safari, and all the other browsers. It'll work in all those browsers to start off with as a self-contained web app, and then these are progressive enhancements where we're using technology to pull up the experience and make it really, really good.
Instagram.
What's that?
It's not about creating Instagram.
No, it's not about creating Instagram. And there's stats on Alex Russell again. I'm quoting, but he's got they've got research that shows that users on average use 27 apps, but they use hundreds of websites. But there's this, people don't trust websites yet. A good litmus test is, I'm directly quoting Alex here, but like who uses a web client on the desktop for email, right? Show of hands. Okay, so a lot of you. Who uses a web client for their email on mobile? Show of hands. Like complete inverse value. Because mobile web isn't quite right, and I don't know what I'm saying now. Things like the progressive enhancements that make this better and actually perform the same to the same level of expectation the users expect is a progressive enhancement, basically. And I don't recommend you build a mobile app for iOS and then a web app. I would just build the web app. It doesn't mean you won't lose users. You never had those users in the first place. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. I think we're out of time.
Oh.
Thank you, Remy.
Cool.